Hey, everybody, welcome back to Build It with Tim. On this week's episode, we are going to be exploring the YouTube API a little bit in order to integrate that particular API with an existing YouTube app that we already have. So I've talked about this particular app in two videos actually. So one was how to build a YouTube management system in under 20 seconds, and the other one was how we can allow users to hide or show fields based on their own particular preferences. All right, so I'll make sure I link both of those videos below in order for you to check them out if you haven't already. So for this particular build or tutorial, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a custom pipe in order to send a request to the YouTube API. So we're going to walk through how to set that up in kind of a basic sense, and then go into more detail with the actual pipe and how to then build out the page to show the data. All right, so anyways, let's get started and check out what we can do with the YouTube API. All right, as usual, we're going to take a look at the finished product first. And here we have our YouTube app where we are managing all of our YouTube videos that we are creating and posting. Now, once something is actually posted, we want to go retrieve all of the video stats so that we can monitor the views, likes, favorites, and comments. The way we've set this up is through the use of a custom pipe. So we referenced the YouTube API and we built ourselves a custom pipe to go and get that data when we want. The way that we are actually getting that data is through a scheduled task. So every day at 5 p.m., these totals will refresh. However, we also have a button here using the task component where we can manually refresh, run that particular pipe, and go and get the statistics for each video in our video table and save them back to the 4 fields that we've created for our videos. All right, so first things first, just to give you an idea of what's happening here, inside of our YouTube app where we are storing all of our videos as video records in the videos table, we have created a video ID field. Now, this ID is part of the actual YouTube video URL. So you'll see it up there when you know youtube.com, watch, whatever. And then it has the actual video ID. So I've created a video ID field. And every time we upload a video right inside of our app, we're just going to make sure that we save that video ID. This is going to be the value in which we send to YouTube in order to return the statistics. So YouTube has to know what video ID do you want the stats for. We provide that video ID from the record, and then it returns all the statistics. So the other 4 fields that I've created here are to store the values that are returned to us from YouTube. We have view count, like count, number or favorite count, and comment count. Now, all of these are number fields inside of the app here. So I formatted them as a number and given them a thousands delimiter, in case you're real big time and you got thousands of views and likes and comments. Okay, so that's all we have to do for the data itself. Now, before we get started with the pipe, I just want to talk about how we're going to get access to this particular API. In order to do this, we have to go into Google's Cloud Console. All right, so if you have a Google account, then you likely have access to this, but we need to go there in order to set this up. So we're going to create a project, and I'm not going to go super in depth here because Google's instructions are very well documented, but we're going to create a project, and then we're going to go and create an API key. So we're going to go to API and services and then credentials, and then we can create credentials, select API key, and that will generate a key for your use. Now, what's interesting about the YouTube API is that you can actually make a request with just a regular API key. We don't have to use OAuth in order to actually authenticate ourselves, unlike other Google services like Drive and Docs and Gmail and stuff like that. So pretty handy that we can do it this way. So we're going to create that credential, the API key, save the key. The next thing you need to do is go to enabled APIs and services, and we're going to click enable APIs and services here, and we're going to search for YouTube, and the one we want to enable is YouTube Data API v3. Okay, now I've already had this enabled, so I can click try this API, and it's going to open up Google's API Explorer. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit for you so you can see. But what we are doing here is we are getting videos, and we are listing videos. So this is the particular resource that we're going to use here. I highly recommend you explore this a little bit if this is something that you want to build into your app. The reason being is because their actual API Explorer is really, really handy, especially since the pipe that we'll be building is going to be built from scratch. So we can choose something like this, list video by ID, and it's going to automatically fill in some content here. So in our case, we only want the statistics, and the ID that we can send can be one of your video IDs. So we'll copy and paste one in here. And then when we go to execute it, we're going to make sure we uncheck OAuth and only send the API key. We can click execute, and this will return statistics for us. Now we're going to click show code, HTTP, and then we can copy this whole address. So we'll copy it up to where it would say your API key. And now we can take this back to Tadabase and start to build out our pipe. So inside the pipe section here, we will choose add a custom pipe. We can call this YouTube API. And then we'll create one API call, get video stats, and we can paste that particular URL inside of this input here. All right, so we are going to we're going to create two parameters because this is going to be a dynamic request, meaning we have multiple video records, meaning we have multiple video IDs, and we want to send the particular ID depending on which record we want to retrieve the information for. So here where we have the ID and then the video ID, we're going to turn this into a parameter by doing an open curly bracket, and then we can call this whatever we want. I'll do video underscore ID, and then close it with a curly bracket. Now the API key, I can do the same thing, but this is actually going to be stored somewhere different. The API key is not dynamic. The API key is going to be, it's going to be a global parameter. So we can add it in our global parameters tab. Make sure that I save this, and then we'll navigate to this other tab called global parameters. We will now add our parameter. We will type this out exactly how we did in the actual request here, API key. We could actually copy that, but we don't need the curly brackets here. Now, we're going to take that API key that was provided to us from Google Cloud Console, and we're going to paste it in here as a default value. After we've pasted it, make sure that we save, and then we can go back and continue working on the actual request. All right, now the other parameter that we have to set up is the video ID. So the parameter exists inside of the actual URL, but we need to give Tadabase a way to fill that parameter with a dynamic value. So inside of this parameters tab, we'll click add new parameter. Again, we'll call this the exact same thing as we did in the overview section, but without the curly brackets. This does not have a default value because we are going to feed a record value in here every time we make this request. So we can click save and head over to the test tab. And now we can make sure this works in the same way it did in the API Explorer through the YouTube API, but we can click test by giving it a video ID. And here you can see we have our statistics and all the other information that we might want to get from a particular video. Now, in order to save these values back to the fields that we created in our videos table, we need to map these responses. So we can click populate responses, and we can uncheck all of this stuff, but we need to expand this array and make sure that we are only getting the values that we want, which are the view count, like count, favorite, and comment count. I can rename these responses to be a little bit more user-friendly. And now we have our responses that we can use to save these values back to our app. Okay, that's it for the pipe. All right, so I'll go through it one more time here, but we are sending a GET request. Now this comes from what YouTube wants us to do. Okay, so by using their API Explorer, you can see it's a GET request. Then we've copied this whole address, which is where the request gets sent, and we've pasted it into our API call here. We've turned 2 of the URL bits into parameters. So we have video ID and API key inside of curly brackets. The API key is stored as a global parameter because that is static and will never change. However, the video ID has been added as a parameter in the parameters tab. Okay, and then lastly, we have mapped our response, populated our responses in order to get these values here, which are inside of this response. Now, how are we going to actually get these values? Like, how are we going to build it into the live app, into the page, the pages themselves? So we have our page where we want to display these statistics. And in order to do this, we are going to create an automated task or a scheduled task. And we can call this get video stats here. This task is going to run on schedule on the videos table. So it's going to go through the videos table record by record, each video, and it will run on schedule every day at, let's do 5 p.m. And our action is going to look like this. We are going to update this record. We're going to trigger our custom YouTube pipe. The API key parameter we do not need to include because, again, that's a static value. Okay, that's preset inside of our pipe, but we do need to pass the specific video ID that's stored on each video record. So we'll choose that parameter and say it comes from a record value of the video ID field. Now, the only thing we have to do from here is just make sure that we take our API responses and map them over to our actual data fields. So we'll select each one of our data fields that we want to actually save a value in. And then we can choose pipe response from the dropdown for each one and just make sure that we are mapping them to their corresponding response, which I didn't do. Okay, so pipe response, there we go. View count, like count, favorite count, and comment count. There we go. Okay, so that's all good to go. So I can run this task now, and it's going to actually populate all of those particular fields with the video statistics. But I also want to give the a user the way to manually refresh these whenever they want. And we can do that even though we have a task created that's going to run on schedule. We can also add a task component, which is going to give us a button to run this task. So we're going to walk through the setup here, make sure that we're selecting the right task. And then under options, I can rename this. So we'll say refresh video stats. And now when we go to our actual app, you're going to see that we have our table with all of our the fields displayed that we want to see. And we can click this button now to go and get the new statistics and save them to our fields. Okay, so here is all of our statistics for all the videos that we have in the app. Now I manually refresh this now, but in a couple hours, in about 4 hours, this is going to run on schedule and go and refresh these again. All right, so it's a great way. You have 2 options. You can schedule it, or you can manually refresh, or you can do both, I guess. So 3 options, but you can see here that this is working exactly how we wanted to. All right, so just a quick recap here. With everything that we had to do in order to make this work. Because this was a custom pipe, first we had to reference the documentation through YouTube on how to actually create the pipe. So we have a project in Google Cloud Console. We added an API key for that particular project and then enabled the YouTube API for that project. Okay, then we found which endpoint we wanted to utilize. In this case, we wanted to get a video by its ID. So using the YouTube API Explorer, we were provided the necessary information that we needed for our custom pipe. inside of Tadabase, we created our own custom pipe and then basically copied all of that information over. We added two parameters here so that we can do things dynamically, one being the video ID so that we can send it from each record, and the other being an API key that we are storing as a global parameter because that's a static value. All right, and after mapping our responses, we could then take all of these values every time the request is sent and save them back to our actual data fields. Okay, so that's basically it for today's episode. I know it was kind of a quick one here, but I wanted to make sure that I got a video out to you all because, as you know from my last video, I will be moving in just a couple days. So I'm going to have a little bit of a time off, but I promise I'll be back as soon as I can. All right, as soon as all my stuff is set up and I'm settled in the new house, I'll be back with more videos. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.